the time.
So you're going to give us the clue on that then. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you.
You're gonna do the countdown?
3, 2, 1, action.
Hey, Maria.
Hey, Lisa.
Exciting day today.
It sure
It's
is.
Friday. That means the diversity duo. It also means we're reaching into the state of Massachusetts and we're going to bring back somebody that the two of us used to work with.
Do tell.
Well, sit right back and we're just going to get started. So let's do this. Okay. So, Maria, are you
Lisa?
ready?
I am ready.
Let me reintroduce you to Michelle Morin.
Hi, Michelle. It's been a long time, my friend.
Hi, Maria. Hi, Lisa. How are you both today?
We are great. So much better now that you're here to join us.
Absolutely.
It's an honor and a privilege to join
Well,
you.
thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for
Thank
that.
you.
So good. We're going to hand this over to you to let you do your introduction because we have been told that our introductions go on too long and that we embarrass people. So, but I'm going to, before you introduce yourself, I want to tell the story because I don't know that Maria knows this, the story of how we reunited. So we reunited a couple of years back. I was about to do a presentation. It was a pretty big presentation, and I wanted to have all my ducks in a row. So I was out online doing some research, and I came across this really amazing this timeline of supplier diversity, and really went into some great depth, gave resources and references, and I was like, I need to use this. Not only do I need to use this, I need to know the person who wrote it because we're in the same circle, not knowing that we're in the same circle, we're in the same interest category. So I reached out to this woman. I wrote this very formal message of, I read your information. I'd be very interested in, using this and sharing. And would you mind? Guess who it was? Michelle Morin. She said, of course, feel free to use this. Then I started looking at her LinkedIn. I was like, wait, I worked with her. So welcome back into my life, Michelle. Thank you so much. Thank you. But for the audience, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, about your history, your work, etc.
Sure. It's always the most uncomfortable question, right? So I have about 14 years now working in the procurement and supplier inclusion space. And that's a shift of a career because I spent about 2 decades prior to that working in the litigation support space, as well as teaching. So let's stay with supplier diversity and procurement because that's really our topic of today. I've had the pleasure to support the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which is where I met Maria and Lisa, and work as a supplier diversity professional in what used to be the operational services division. There have been some changes in the Commonwealth. And so now supplier diversity is its own division, which I think is wonderful progress. And I encourage other states to do the same. I then left Massachusetts to go to the state of Delaware because I wanted promotion. And I served as the executive director of the Office of Supplier Diversity that sat in Government Support Services, and that's under OMB, Office of Management and Budget. And I had the pleasure there to work for 2 different governor administrations. And then I got to go to a global startup, which grew out of the merger of Dow and DuPont. That merger was 22 months to get to 3 separate global companies. And so I have just exited working at Corteva AgriScience. And Corteva is a pure play ag company that's global. And there I led global supplier diversity and procurement sustainability. And what I love the most about what we all do and what I've had a pleasure to do is it requires partnership and influence leading with all the buyers, all decision makers, and building warm relationships with the supply base to create the best potential bidding table to serve whoever it is that you are working for and really have fit for purpose, best results, and have excellence in operational service from a procurement, buy, and services perspective. So my background in the last 14 years is in that space. As I mentioned, 2 decades prior to that, serving in unique ways for litigation support, from a global view to, at the time, the world's largest law firm, to also a very small stint on a contract serving the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Attorney General's office. So 2 times serving the Commonwealth, and happy to be having this conversation today with the two of you and re-anchoring our Massachusetts relationship.
That's great. Thank you.
You know, Michelle, I always wonder after, because we're connected on LinkedIn as well, and I read your bio there, and I see, how there's a connection between what you were doing with the different companies. And I always wanted to ask you why you chose procurement. What was your why?
I was intentionally making a career shift. And my career originally, as I mentioned, was litigation support, which means the bad thing happened and there's a lawsuit, and you're having a adversarial relationship because you have someone that's opposing you on the other side of the verses, and it's a battle, and it's a fight to win, and it's not a win-win. It's a win. It's a winner take all type of approach. And it was fun and it was interesting, and I worked with some truly gifted, talented, and amazing people. And with the intentional shift, I wanted to be on the side of putting together good, positive deals with solid partners who together were looking for a triple win. A win for the entity, the supplier, a win for the organization, whether it was government or a corporation, and then a win for the customers. And when you work in government, the customers are your constituents, your
Mm-hmm.
neighbors, the people
That's
that
right.
you meet in the grocery store and next door and at a parade, and everyone that lives in your community. When you work for a corporate, it's certainly neighbors, but the customers are also serving different customers. So the customers of your customers are your neighbors. And procurement really is putting together the right agreement to do good things with good governance and fair pricing to serve external customers. And I love that change. And I've stayed in the space and have now added sustainability to those efforts because it really is philanthropic while business. And you can meet people where they are, and together you can do something better than you could have done by yourself.
So I just want to jump in because I think what you're saying there is so spot on, and you're talking really about and thinking about or making us think about a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier N level of customer relationship, right? And I love the idea that procurement. So procurement to me stands back to back with sales, right? And back to back with operations. But for this conversation, let's keep it to sales for a moment. So you can't have a sales team that's selling nothing. They have to sell something. And that something had to have been procured by some method, whether it's raw material, whether it's human capital, whether it's blah, blah, blah. We go right down the list. And when we think about things from a procurement perspective, we're looking at our tier 1, our tier 2, our tier 3, our tier N. And when we think about where sales, especially as we're shifting into a sustainability conversation, when we think about clients or customers, here too we need to think about that tier 1, that tier 2, that tier 3, right? Because that you can't, there's only so long bad materials or bad service or bad product can be sold without it becoming problematic for however we look back. That's exactly, that's to me, and I know that you and I kind of agree on where procurement sits in that perspective, especially as we talk about win-win, which when we talk about win-win, I don't think we're talking about the same thing anymore as the 1980s win-win, right? I feel like it's moved on. We've moved away from that and shifted into a place. Oh, you went off the screen there for a moment, and shifted into a place where everything gets to be connected and we get to call it what it is now. We hadn't done that before. And that's when you start talking about that adversarial relationship versus kind of a proactive relationship. I would love, so I've said a lot. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to land this plane. When I think about the adversarial versus the proactive procurement relationship, I'd love to hear some scenarios from you, some real life stories about how that's played out, and also those ones, because we all have these ones too, where it should have played out differently, and in hindsight, when you replay it in your mind, right? How can you think about it differently, and what did you learn from it for the next time? That was really long-winded. My apologies, everybody.
That's okay. I'm going to pull a piece out and answer, and then help me answer the rest of your question, please. So, an example of what could be adversarial, because I have confidentiality agreements, as you do too, and I can't give a lot of real life examples, but I can give parallels as examples. So, you need to buy a widget, and you can buy different quality of the widget. You can buy different sizes of the widget. You can buy different quantities of the widget. You can also buy it from different parts of the world. So you could purchase locally, or you could purchase for far cheaper from very far away. There could be in procurement a dominance style. We're so big, you want to work with us. You will sell to us, and we're going to contract for, let's do the typical 5 years. We're going to contract for a 3-year initial term with 2 1-year potential extensions for a possibility of a total of 5 years with us. And widgets are not part of a CPI index, so we're not going to agree to vacillating price changes. We're going to buy widgets for X dollars. Now, if you change widgets to N95 masks, there was a point where a CPI index would have been important.
Mm-hmm.
But if you bought your widget, you did your contract for your widget, and I'm a large company and I need widgets, or I need N95 masks, and everyone on the planet had this experience, we're going to contract for X dollars, and we're going to contract for X amount with this kind of cadence. So let's imagine we're a hospital. Hospitals need masks, right? And the dominance is, we're a large hospital system. You will serve us. You will give us this many in this cadence. You will hold them in your inventory, in your warehouse. You will hold them so that we can trigger the order of them anytime we want, but you will not invoice us for them, and we will not pay for them until they walk in our door. So you are holding our inventory. You cannot give it to anyone else. You cannot sell it to anyone else. It's ours, but we're not going to pay you until we trigger the delivery. And you're holding a regular amount of quantity for our benefit, for our pleasure. And you're negotiating, you a supplier, you're negotiating your own costs, that tier 1, tier 2, tier N that Lisa, you were speaking about, and you're managing your profit margin. And when we don't have an urgent need for these widgets or these masks, we're going to renegotiate the price before we extend the contract.
Right.
Because in procurement, we're not only showing some dominance in the way that we're forcing you to hold our inventory at no cost to us, but cost to you, and you're going to deliver it to us. You're not charging for delivery. That's going to be a baked in cost. But now we want to deliver savings, because procurement also has an obligation to deliver savings to the organization. In that scenario, you hope the supplier has negotiated their profit margin in a way that they can continue to serve you with excellence. You're going to continue to have quarterly business reviews to review their customer service, their delivery? Is it on time? Is it in the quantities that we want? Are there any damages in what's being delivered to us? Are there any issues with the people that are doing the work? Are there any issues with invoicing? By the way, we're going to pay you in 120 days, not 30 days. So those dominance style of relationships that could happen in procurement don't work well with the supplier diversity community regularly. Now, we certainly have diverse suppliers who have solid cash flow and solid financials and all of the normal business operations where they finance themselves the same way that other multi-billion dollar states and corporates do. But we also have smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And when an urgent or emergent issue occurs, as COVID did, and all of a sudden this widget becomes one of the most important commodities on the planet,
Yeah.
that supplier can't get the same quantity for the same price. In fact, the manufacturer is increasing the price and reducing the quantity that all of their customers can have. And so that's the tier 2 or the tier N to our supplier. Our supplier wants to increase the price for us. We want to keep the price as is. And now we want to empty the shelves to guarantee that we have them inside.
Yeah.
And in these relationships, and using that one example, there's the potential for dominance. There's the potential for harming smaller suppliers. There's also the requirement then that the organization, whether it's government or whether it's a corporation, may need to increase their pricing to get the essential item. You could potentially use your act of God clause or force majeure clause and have a fight either way. But at the end of the day, you still need to have good business relations because you have an urgent need this moment, but you also have the long game. What do I need after this urgent moment? It's similar things that I needed before this urgent moment. And I need to have suppliers who can run with me as I continue to have urgencies or emergencies, but also business as usual. So I think that gave you a little example of when a win-win could turn into a dominance experience, when a world urgency or emergency can change the relationship with a supplier and what we need. And now I've talked for a while, so Lisa, I'm going to stop talking.
No,
Help perfect. Any
I
question or any addition to that, please?
I have one little addition, and I think because I think that is, the N95 mask is a great, it's a great talking point for procurement, and I think it will be for years to come. But I think what it doesn't reflect, if we're continuing to look through procurement solely through the lens of COVID or states of emergency, we're losing the other 95% of procurement, right? And which I believe now, especially since COVID, I think I've moved my thought process more to a supplier relationship management thought process. And I've always been SR or vendor management driven. But I think since COVID, right sizing yourself against your supplier base is hugely important. And I think this is where supplier diversity plays such an important role. Is if you're a mid-market organization, and I want to forget about large organizations simply for the minute that we can't all take our action plans or our playbooks only from big business because we're not in big business. And if we look to the mid-market as what small organizations are striving to be, my organization is not striving to be IBM. Not now, not ever. I'm a little too old anyway to worry about the longevity of how long it would be to be an IBM or any of the large organizations, right? But I can start a business as a small business, and I can get into that mid-market, God willing, right? And that's where I need to look at my playbook. And I need to think about, How do I ensure that I have the ability to pick up the telephone and call that small provider, and capture my goods and services in a way that is that I'm not competing, because I can't compete against, if the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has a contract with you, Maria, and I have a contract with you, chances are pretty good you're going to forget all about me if backs against the wall. But if it's me against another small organ or mid-sized organization, what's our relationship look like? How do we foster this, right? Because we're all about the collaboration. That's what we talk about, week after week. How do we ensure that becomes part of the vernacular for procurement, is build those relationships? And I think I know a little bit about your work, and I know that you've done a heck of a job in regards to building and fostering relationships with small organizations. Could you talk a little bit about that piece, in how do you foster those relationships? How do you capture them and develop them?
Sure. I from a sustainability perspective, I think any of us that are looking at our retirement investments, we have a diversified retirement portfolio where we have different sizes of investment and different sizes of where we're putting our money and what we're doing with it. I want you to have that same thought when you're a business owner, a supplier, looking at your customer base. I encourage always that you have a diversified customer portfolio. And I encourage when you are working in a procurement department that you look at your suppliers and that your suppliers are also a diversified portfolio. So NMSDC and WeBank both use sizing for their suppliers, their certified suppliers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4. So a tier 1 is a supplier whose annual revenue is up to 1 million. A tier 2 supplier is 1 million to 10, a tier 3 is 10 million to 50 million, and a tier 4 is 50 million and above. I contend that governments and global corporations, multi-billion dollar organizations, can do business with all 4 tiers and should.
Agree. Yes.
And so it depends what category internal to your organization or your government, whether you're a mid-market size or whether you're a global or just a multinational. You might be only in a couple of nations, but you're still large enough. If I'm a supplier looking at a customer base, I want to serve all sizes. If I'm a corp, I want all sizes in my supply base. So if I'm looking for HR coaches, I'm looking for professional development style companies that are going to help me coach either my high potential young employees in, but we see such high potential in them that they're going to grow quickly. That's where I can easily employ a tier 1, a company with revenue up to 1 million, because I'm looking for someone's expertise. And someone may have always been an entrepreneur and a CEO of their company, or they may have been an employee in government or in corporate and decided to become entrepreneurial and launch their own business. And they may, like you, Lisa, have zero intention to scale beyond a certain dollar amount. Perhaps they never even want to have another employee. They would prefer having a subcontractor, like you just laid out, with Maria as the prime and you as the sub. And if that was Maria's venue and I wanted to hire Maria to do some coaching and she needed to expand her capacity, and she brought in subs, as long as the subs get approved in our contract process, I'm good with that. So that's one example, HR. Equally, we can have landscaping needs at 400 different physical locations. We'll use the Commonwealth for a minute, and I'm guesstimating 400 locations. But each one of those locations needs landscaping, needs someone to plow, needs someone to mow, needs someone to weed and mulch. And you're not going to have the landscape company from Adams, Massachusetts, also be the landscaping company for Plymouth, Massachusetts.
Mhm.
So you can have multiple awards on a similar type of contract, and you can define the geography that companies would bid for. And that geography typically is your headquarters or your location that you're bidding from must be within X number of minutes drive, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, to where you're serving. That gives you another opportunity to have smaller sized suppliers. Now, you could have large suppliers that have multi locations as well, and you could have a nice, rich mix using that example of landscaping. And that's again, snowplow and lawn care. You may need uniforms, whether you're a company and you have uniforms in your company, or you're a government and you need uniforms. You're going to have different kinds of uniforms. Typical mail rooms need a uniform so that they look the same and you know who they are as they're traveling through different levels of secure parts of your building. And those uniforms could be off the shelf. But if you have security guards, or if you're a government and you have state troopers, or you're a county sheriff's department, or you're a city police force, those are off from the bolt uniforms. They're custom cut and custom sewn for each officer so that they have their own. And again, you're not going to have one provider for off the bolt, because you're not going to send your officers out of state or to far distances to get their uniforms. Off the shelf uniforms, think hospitals and its scrubs. Off the shelf uniforms, they can come from anywhere because you have a style and then multi-size runs. So you can have, again, in those examples, different size suppliers serving your organization. From a sustainability perspective, the reduced delivery distance is really good from an environmental factor. From a sustainability perspective, on the social element, the inclusion of diverse and small businesses in those opportunities is a fantastic way to serve your local community. And from a governance perspective, you are putting all the right procurement governance to any and all of those contracts. Now, I gave examples of both goods and services. You can expand beyond those to the myriad needs of any government or organization. So, Lisa, that's the best response I can give you to your question.
That was a great response.
It sure was very detailed. I just wrote, if I don't write it down, I will forget it. I have a nanosecond memory. But before I ask you this question, I want to ask you, early on, we had a small business here in the construction field. And I, as a certification, expert, I always love to ask this question. What why is diverse supplier or socioeconomic certification so important? And I want to ask this from you, as you're on the other side, you're a procurement expert. Why are they so important?
So I think I have two methods to respond to you. First is inclusion, and the second is then why certification for the inclusion. So inclusion is an intentional activity on the part of a procurement organization where you do not only look at the incumbent, and you do not only look at companies that you know. You have to look at potential suppliers that you don't know yet, that you might be able to do business with. So you have to frame, what are the parameters? What are the minimum parameters that I need in a supplier in order for them to serve the need that we have today? And whatever those minimum parameters are, they're not what your incumbent has. Because there was a point in time where you did not know your incumbent and you took a chance because they met some minimum. So you don't set the minimum based on the incumbent. You set the minimum based on good common sense, risk profile, financial profile, sustainability profile, and financial profile. When you want to see certification, if you are intentionally inviting diverse suppliers, you want a certified diverse supplier so that you can rely on the fact of the certification. I'm going to use two examples for certification because I also did certification both for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as well as for the state of Delaware. And I rely now on corporate certifications rather than state certifications, but I don't exclude state certifications. The example that we all have is a heterosexual married couple, and the man is a licensed master electrician. And he wants the opportunity to bid on something that is looking for diversity. Nothing ever looks only for diversity, by the way. But he wants the opportunity of diversity, and he puts 51% of his company in his wife's name. She doesn't work in the company. She's not an electrician. She's not a master electrician. She's not even a journeyman electrician.
Yep.
And she applies for certification because she thinks it's good for her family and she thinks it's good for her husband. In that instance, she could be the CEO, but she is not a person who has independent knowledge to serve the customer for the thing that the customer pays the company.
That's right.
So she doesn't have the electricity, the electrician, the license. And without that, she can't control the daily operations of the business for which customers pay the company. Another example, because having that wife get that electrician license might be hard. Another example is a trucking company. You could own 20 different trucks, tractor trailers. You have to have the CDL license if a CDL license is required in your state. It's not insurmountable to go get that CDL license. And you don't ever have to go drive truck, but you have to be able to. You have to have the independent knowledge to control the daily operations of the business for which the customers pay the company.
That's right. That's true.
Someone's not paying the company for bookkeeping. Someone's not paying the company for CEO administrative work. They're paying the company for electrical work or for moving goods from A to B.
Mm-hmm.
And those things are what certification is based on. Certification was created historically to prevent majority companies from taking a token diverse person, putting 51% of the company in that token diverse person's name, paying them some amount of money, and they're not enjoying the decision making, the hiring, the firing, the daily operations that they're serving the customer. So certification by government or by the national certification entities is trust. It allows you to know that they've been vetted and reviewed, and that its certification is not one and done. Certification is a recertification on a cycle. And when a material change occurs in that company, you have to come back before the recertification time to come back and be reviewed again, and you may or may not be certified. There are absolutely companies that start as a diverse company and are certified, and over time they're no longer certified because they no longer meet the requirements of certification.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to do inclusive work. I want to have an inclusive supply base. I want to have a certification so that I can rely, to my detriment, on the certification. It's a third-party review of that provider, of that supplier, that holds themselves out in that diverse community, and they've been vetted by the organization or the government. So I hope that answered what you were looking for, Maria. Inclusion matters, and having a certification for that inclusion matters.
And just to add to what you were saying on the example, Michelle, of the electrician, what a lot of small companies or companies that are seeking certification, period, they don't understand, because, that's what I used to do for the state before I retired, is that, let's say it's husband and wife and they started the business at the same time. But if the husband, who is the minority owner, is the one that holds all the licenses besides what you just stated, let's say, for example, something happened to the husband. He passes away, he goes away, whatever. Now, who holds the license for that, for that field? She will have to, when she comes up for renewal, they will deny her because she no longer has the license.
Well, she wouldn't have been certified in the first point. But to your point, when an owner who doesn't have the license has to overly rely on a non-majority owner, they're at the mercy of that non-majority owner, as
Exactly.
Maria
Yep.
just named.
Hmm.
So I know, Maria, you said minority, but you meant non-majority instead of.
Non, yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Thank you, Michelle. Non-majority. That's correct.
You know, it's interesting. I often hear when I go to an event, well, I know a guy, right? And we know the story that comes after I know a guy. I know a guy who put it in his wife's name and et cetera. And that's why I don't believe in it. And I just want to address that for a moment.
Yep.
I know a guy who cheated on his taxes. I still continue to pay my taxes.
Exactly.
I think there's this argument of fraud. And I read something one time and if I'm wrong about this number, I apologize and I will stand corrected. But, years ago it was there's 15% of fraud in everything. That's a disheartening amount, I think. I think it's a pretty high number. But even if we go with 15% fraud, if it's in everything, it's in everything. I can't live my life worried about the 15% fraud. I have to believe in, you had mentioned, Michelle, putting some faith in some of these programs. I've been certified. I had no idea how difficult it was going to be. That wasn't my side of the house when I worked at the state. So I didn't know what was happening in the process of how to get certified. Right? It was during COVID. I had to pick up my telephone. I had to walk somebody around my house on Zoom because I had my home office. I had to talk about who lived in my house and where was my space. So my point being twofold. If there is fraud, I don't know how they do it, but congratulations, move on with your life in fraud. Wonderful. But for those thinking the intent of certification is an easy fraud, one, I disagree with that entirely.
It's not.
Because the mechanism to get certified, both from state and some of these certifying agencies, is significant. And again, we don't give up anything else because of possible fraud.
Right.
If you bought into the process. I'm also someone, you never want to tell me if you cheated on your taxes or you did something fraudulent. I will drop a dime on you like that. I mean, because that's the intent here, right? And the intention is we're all playing by the same rules. So I say that second. If you know a guy, drop a dime. Other than that, move aside because we have business to do. And
in the process for certification, as we know, and you know it because you went through it, they vet you, and they vet you very, very well.
Yeah.
I mean, I had clients call me, bent out of shape. Oh, they want to see this, and I said, then give it to them. But it wasn't on the list. But if you read the smaller print, it says if we have a need to require more documents, we will do so. Oh, I thought this was the list. So, I tell everyone, really trust the process because the investigators really go through, they read every page, they look at every number, and they will make phone calls. So, Michelle, with your extensive expertise in procurement, where do you see the biggest opportunities for innovation over the next few years?
I love that question.
Thank you.
I look at future predictors to really pay attention to innovation. So here are a couple. It's 2025 right now. By 2035, the global population will increase by between 2 billion and 3 billion more people. When I started, I don't know the math for today, but when I started working at Corteva, it was 2019. That was a 42% growth of number of humans on the planet from 2019 to 2035. If I stop and do the math for a minute for the next 10 years, I can do that. We're at 8 billion now. We were at 7 billion in 2019. So if you think about that many more people joining the population, and you think about what services will be necessary and what goods would be necessary. And I worked at a food company, right? Corteva helped farmers feed the world. And when you thought about the population growth by 42% from 2019 to 2035, who's going to feed those people? What's food going to look like? Is food going to become more vegetable based? just because of, the logistics of land versus animal based. So that's one space for innovation. When we look at generationally, the fact that baby boomers are retiring still, but some are still in the workforce. Some baby boomers have businesses and they want to sell because their children don't want their company.
Right. That is correct.
And so an innovation is, if you already have a business, you could grow quickly by finding the right business to purchase and work with a boomer who owns their business today on what it would look like to run in parallel and expand your current offering or add an additional revenue stream as an innovation to your company. Equally, when we look at boomers, many are homeowners. What will living in place look like for boomers? Are there new goods or services that could be beneficial in the home? And let's look at the medical industry. What will the largest population, boomers, need? What will the increase in the medical field be to serve the aging population that is going to grow exponentially? And now let's put that into construction and commercial construction instead of residential construction, because residential is inside that one home. But in commercial construction, what will it look like for these additional communities? Maybe not nursing homes, maybe nursing homes, but communities where boomers might be willing to buy in now and age in place with additional wraparound services. So when I think about innovation, and I just think about two things: population, age, what fields could be impacted. But now we have to talk about technology, because when you say innovation, most everybody thinks about technology. And AI is a big change right now. Cryptocurrency or some kind of electronic coin are also innovations. And there will be new ways that currency will be dealt with in the next 20, 30 years. So if I were a business owner today and I was looking at innovation, I would look at my core clients. I would look at the clients where 30% of my revenue comes from, and I would look at where are they innovating and how do I ask them to put me in a development program so that I can grow with them to continue to serve them in that innovation space. And I would look for those partnerships in a new way. I would have those conversations before bidding would come on the next iteration of a contract.
Yeah.
I would attend any government pre-bid meetings. And I would look, if I'm in the construction industry, I'd look at design build. And I would go to the pre-meeting. And, a lot of the primes that are going to bid, they don't want to talk at those pre-meetings. But I would be asking questions of whoever's giving the tour or the lecture. You want this design build. What are the innovations you're looking for here? What innovations might you need, not at the immediate build, but what are the future potential renovations that you're looking at? What's the difference in lighting in this building compared to old-fashioned lighting? Think about a category that you already know has innovation and what's coming next.
Michelle, the timing of that answer was incredible. We literally just the episode, we record a couple of episodes in a day, and we literally just finished a wonderful episode with a woman-owned small business, woman-owned minority small construction and engineering firm, and almost verbatim.
Yep.
And what I'm loving is the playbook that she presented that she's following is the playbook from your procurement perspective, almost the advice that you'd be giving to her. And I think kudos to both of you, because
Yes.
you're both on the same page, and it's pretty amazing from this seat to watch and hear two people so in tune with where that particular industry is going. So that was amazing.
Thank you. That was
Thank
an
you.
incredible answer. Thank you.
when we talk about technology and when we talk about sustainability, there's a few ESG models that we could be looking at and thinking about. I know that EcoVadis is one that is near and dear for you. I'd love, let's jump in. What do you think? What do you think the future holds, not just for EcoVadis, but for the customers of how we think about it, how we use it, and how we talk about measuring a company's sustainability drive?
I'm happy to do that. Thank you. Sustainability means a lot of different things. Diverse suppliers, non-diverse suppliers, big suppliers, small suppliers, mid-sized suppliers, the entire supply base needs to be able to speak about the sustainability not only of their company, but of the goods or services that they are bidding to government or to a corporation. Sustainability includes not just greenhouse gas emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3, and there is a scope 4,
Yep.
let's say scope N, but having a scorecard, I think, is the easiest way to get started. And over the past 5 years, especially, my conversation with the supply base is if you don't yet have a scorecard, the easiest thing to do is to go get an EcoVadis scorecard.
Mm-hmm.
EcoVadis is a global gold standard for scorecard of the supply base. Now, it may not be the gold standard for large multinational and global organizations. There are other scorecards for that, like CSRD and many other things. I'm not going to speak about those because I really want to speak to the supply base. Large entities know how to do their own sustainability reporting, and they do. And if you're a supplier and you're bidding or you're already an incumbent, you should be reading the sustainability report of your customers. And with EcoVadis, you can, in a short period of time, buy an evaluation that then gives you a scorecard. You're not buying a score, you're buying an evaluation, and you then have a scorecard. I like a 3-year cycle. There may be a point in the future where less than 3 years might be logical.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to have a more thoughtful time
I
to.
would think that would be industry dependent.
Yes and no. So I just came from the chemical industry. And in the chemical industry, we were part of a global organization, and the global organization said every 3 years. EcoVadis sets their scorecards to expire every 1 year. But in the
Yep.
chemical industry, we were saying 3 years. Because truly, in that industry, you're not going to have a lot of material change in a 12-month cycle
Right.
unless you have a negative occurrence. And then that is an occasion for a new evaluation. Here's what a scorecard does for you. It lets you know where your strengths are, and it lets you know where your areas of opportunity for improvement are. And let's be really clear. No company is going to be perfect. No company is going to have the best scores the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And you should have areas of opportunity for improvement. And then you should make reasoned and intentional decisions. Are you going to improve whatever that thing is or not? So, ethics is one of the scores in sustainability. Your ethics score should be as high as it can be. And you might not have a high ethics score to start with because you might not have a written ethics policy for your company.
Mm-hmm.
And simply not having a written policy is going to give you a low score. It doesn't mean that you don't operate with ethics. It means that you haven't documented that you operate with ethics because you haven't created an ethics policy. So having a low score is directional for what next to focus on. It's not a negative experience. And it's a 12-week review process. So you have 2 weeks to answer about 22 questions.
Mm-hmm.
Those 22 questions change depending on your industry and your location. And then in the 12 weeks of review, sustainability experts for your industry and relative to your location are reviewing you and all others in your industry, your field. So it truly has expertise. It has a governed and scientific approach to those scores. And you then have a variety of information available to you from your scorecard, but you also then have additional education that EcoVadis makes available to you to help you and your employees learn more about what you're doing well and then those potential areas for improvement. It's normal that a corporate or a government in a quarterly business review, how are you doing on this contract? How are you serving us? How are we doing on this contract? How are we working together? To also then ask sustainability questions. And in the supply base, if you're not ready to have sustainability conversations, or if you simply say, we plant trees, it's nice to plant trees, but that's not only a sustainability activity. So professional credential, professional integrity is having a sustainability scorecard now and using the gold standard instead of something that's not the gold standard, right? If a gold standard exists and if it's what larger organizations are using and relying on, it's that same conversation we just had about certification.
That's right. That's
And
right.
so using EcoVadis as the organization because of their scientific rigor, and because they are now a B Corp, which is also a sustainability element, and even if you are a B Corp, being a B Corp by itself might not be enough. Have a sustainability scorecard and attach it to your bids.
That's great advice. That's really great. I can't believe I want another half hour at
I
least, but we
mean,
don't.
time has fly. My God, the conversation is
Oh my
flowing. I'm
God.
so happy that you agreed to come to the podcast. I have learned so much in this, short time that we have been speaking. Um, as we are heading towards, the end of this podcast, I consider you as a visionary, right? And what advice will you give future entrepreneurs who or aspiring entrepreneurs who want to create tangible services and products with a lasting impact?
Good question.
So first, I very much enjoyed this conversation, and I did just look at the clock, and I'm surprised how fast time went.
Right?
Right?
Yes, yes. So how fun to for all of us to get reacquainted and have this good conversation. For entrepreneurs, for hopeful entrepreneurs, for younger people who just don't want to go fit into a corporate norm, but you want to own a business, and for people who have worked in industry for whatever period of time and you now want to be an entrepreneur. My advice is this: don't jump immediately, make a plan. And there are free resources and low cost resources available to you. So I'm going to name a few of them. Every state has a small business development center, SBDC. And some states have more than one. So go to Google or however you like to do internet research and look up Small Business Development Center for your state. And then look at how many locations they have and find the location closest to you. They will offer free classes about entrepreneurship. They will also help you write a business plan. If you need funding now or in the future, they will help you modify your business plan to apply for funding through normal funding sources. Most SBDCs are funded themselves in a relationship between the SBA, the US Small Business Administration, and the state government, whatever state they're in. And they typically sit within an educational institution, and it's usually a state-owned educational institution. So they're easy to get to, they're not hard to park at. The employees that work there have good governance of how they help support entrepreneurs. So those are the steps to take to really think yourself through. If you want to do it privately first, because you're private before you want to put yourself vulnerable in front of someone else, you can go online to the US Small Business Administration and you can look up how to create a business plan. There's a free formula and templates for how to create your small business plan. You want to have a small business plan. You want to understand who your core customers are, what your target market is. You want to be able to map out what the costs would be for whatever the services or goods are. You want to look at some additional marketing information. So back at SBDC, you can also ask for an IBIS report, IBIS. And procurement departments use IBIS reports all the time. So let's use marketing as an example. And let's say I want to be an entrepreneur and I've worked in marketing for 3 years for my employer. And now I want to go out on my own. I think I know everything and I want to go out on my own and I want to start a marketing company. I need a business plan. But I also should probably go get an IBIS report. An IBIS report is 100 pages. The SBDC can pull it for you. You can look at the first 10 pages, the executive summary, together with a coach, again, free services, and you can get a better handle on what's available in your current geography and or industry that you want to focus on. Now, we all lived through COVID. We know that using technology like I'm using today, I'm not sitting in Massachusetts today with Lisa and Maria. I'm sitting in Indiana where I happen to live right now. And we are doing this via technology. So I might want to serve well beyond my geography. Use the IBIS report for whatever geography it is that you want to serve and get some of that core research to help give yourself some direction.
This was
Well,
amazing.
this has been such a great conversation, Michelle. Again, I forgot how brilliant you are. Thank you for sharing your ideas and your thoughts and look, I've been like a mad woman taking little keynotes here and there. Um, Again, I want to thank you and
I want to thank her and Michelle. We're going to want to get you back on here again because I
definitely,
think we didn't go deep enough into some of the topics that I would love to do that.
yeah.
I am so sorry that we have to end today. Thank you very much, Maria. I'm going to let you close us out with your reading.
Yes. To the audience, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know that you're going to get tons and tons of information from Michelle. And I like to leave you with my favorite quote. Let's continue to amplify diverse voices and foster meaningful dialogues. Until then, this is Maria.
And I'm Lisa, and we're the Diversity Duo. Thank you. We'll see you next week.